Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. International News Review.
Welcome to this week's International News Review. Steve Oken is in Fiji. We are joined by Lynn Su-Ling, the opinion editor at the Straits Times. Happy to have her help us unpack the stories that we found interesting this week, and in fact, one that cracked us up. First, we go to MAGA. The MAGA movement is in turmoil as Trump's reversal on the Epstein documents sparks backlash from his base. Su-Ling, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. What do you make of the meltdown? And there's lots of things happening in the MAGA space right now, but let's talk about Epstein for a minute and the split between Trump and many of his hardcore supporters.
I think the news raises so many more questions than answers for me. I think the first two questions I have is first, is this the moment that the fever breaks? Because we're seeing a lot of people burning their MAGA hats, especially after Trump came out to say, guys, this is a joke. Don't be a weakling. You know, it's a huge moment and a real question in the MAGA movement. Yeah. But I think the second question also is, why can't Trump shake off this whole Epstein thing? And I think for me, it's because Trump tried to. He tried to ask, hey, boys and girls, what's going on? He tried to be conciliatory. But the reality was that this whole Epstein conspiracy has been juiced from the get-go. It was not confined to a fringe movement. Even J.D. Vance himself, when campaigning for the presidency, said, we need to release the Epstein file. So I think this is a huge thing. That
They've created this monster in many ways, right?
I mean, Trump set up very lofty expectations at the start when he was campaigning. He talked about how he wants to drain the swamp and expose elites. So this is part of that.
And expose the deep state and all that sort of stuff.
And also, Su-Ling, more broadly, it ties into this MAGA movement's, let's be honest, borderline obsession with conspiracy theories, things they read online. And he tapped into this from the very beginning, didn't he? The deep state are controlling everything, including the Epstein file. So it's very hard for him to turn away from that now.
I think it's also because there was a lot of expectation being built up for a very long time. And actually, I would date it back to much earlier on in 2016, where you saw Pizzagate becoming a really big thing. There was this whole lie about how Hillary Clinton had been involved in the sex trafficking.
Pizzagate, yes, in the basement of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to that, right? There's this obsession about sexual abuse and how you need to stem sex trafficking. And I think that's at the heart of it.
And I want to follow up from a media point of view. Obviously, you're the opinion editor at the Straits Times. He's now, latest news, he's now suing the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch himself personally. Just a little bit of background. There's an alleged letter bearing Trump's name, family show. I won't go into details, but it's not very complimentary to women.
A birthday card.
A birthday card to Epstein himself, organised by Ghislaine Maxwell, who's currently serving 20 years for sexual trafficking. And the Wall Street Journal claims this is a proper letter. It's from Donald Trump, and now he denies it, and he's suing the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch himself. What do you make of all that?
I think that he's coming under a lot of pressure. I mean, we've also seen in the last couple of days, he's asked Pam Bondi to release the grand jury transcripts where within means. So I think he's also taking on the media. He's not the first time he's sued the media. In fact, just this week, we've also heard news about how he's managed to win a case. So it's sobering because it's a moment where you see a U.S. administration suing a U.S. media outlet. And it plays into this whole idea that Americans' trust in institutions that have held it up so long is coming under siege. And now you have the U.S. administration sort of waging war on U.S. media institutions. You look at polls, Gallup polls, for example, only a third of Americans trust their U.S. media. And even less when it comes to the courts. We've seen a huge landslide drop in trust in the courts as well. I think it's also because of many years of politicization. Trump himself came under siege when he was in his first administration. There were court cases brought against him. There were allegations. So I think we're just seeing that continued contestation of narratives in the U.S. space.
It is, I think, noteworthy that many Democrats who, of course, are reveling in this MAGA infighting, but many of them have come out and said, look, this was well known during the Biden administration. There's nothing there. Epstein did actually commit suicide. He wasn't murdered in prison. There was no smoking gun list. There was, all down the line, all of the, debunking all of the conspiracy theories that the right had promulgated. They have been saying it was none of this was true from the very beginning. And now Trump is in this very awkward position of having to agree that there was never anything to this, even though they were the ones that were saying there was something to this and it was a big deep state cover up, right? Yeah. So on the one hand, they either lied before, right? If they're correct now, they lied before, or if they were correct before, why are they withholding it? It's this, I don't know, what do you like a conundrum? What do they call that? There's actually a phrase for that kind of conundrum.
You're just spinning your fingers at me. I've got no idea.
I'm hoping that I remember what it is. Anyway, I know. So fascinating, right?
I think it's also fascinating because at the heart of this mega manosphere meltdown is a woman, Pam Bondi. And it's interesting because she's one of the most loyal and powerful people in Trump's cabinet. But people also tend to forget that she's also very qualified. She spent a very long time as a prosecutor and then rose up the ranks to become
she's the Attorney General.
Yeah. And now she's AG, right? Yeah. And so she's having to deal with this. And so it's interesting that all this comes down to a woman.
Well, and she had said in an interview a couple of weeks ago, she had the list of names
sitting on her desk.
Like this was, you can hear the video or you can hear the audio of it everywhere. And now she's saying, no, there was no list.
I mean, I think for me, it also raises the question of personality versus institutions, because on the one hand, Trump has always used bombast to his great advantage. He's managed to, get a lot of attention over these draining the swamp and exposing elites. And he's created this narrative that he's here to enact radical change. And radical change, I guess, when it comes to the Epstein files, is releasing it or giving some idea that there is something behind it, because for the longest time it's been pitched as a Democrat cover-up because important people, celebrities in Hollywood, politicians were behind this.
Bill Gates,
And so I think it also comes into sharper focus because Elon Musk himself a couple of weeks back tweeted and then he deleted the idea that Trump is in the Epstein files. And that has never really gone away now. That stayed quite there.
Yeah, amazing. Last point on the woman angle. There's a broader issue for me. Apparently, according to many reports, Trump himself called the British editor, Emma Tucker, to demand that she ditch the story. She refused, to her credit. Then Trump claims to have called Murdoch himself and told him to stop the article. Murdoch refused. The article went out and now they're suing each other. Is there a broader sense that maybe conservative media, Murdoch media, might be turning away from Trump? They'll accept his political power, but they're just not happy where he's going from a business point of view. They've been very critical of his tariffs in the Wall Street Journal, very critical of a lot of his business dealings. What's your thought on that?
I think you raised a really good point, which is that actually when Trump built his coalition in the 2024 election, it was a much broader one. We actually saw him expand his gains across the country with key demographic groups, not just men, but also young women, blacks and Latinos. And how he's managed to do that is not just about building MAGA. A lot of people were behind him when it comes to the tax cuts for corporates, when it comes to making cost of living more affordable all over again, bring gas prices down. He's built that broad coalition. But that is the challenge with the broad coalition. It is inherently fragile. And so when you talk about the Epstein case, yes, it is a pack because it is the most eye-grabbing headline. But in the last couple of months, what else have we seen? Tariffs have driven a wedge between businesses and corporates. And when it comes to, you say, NVIDIA chips to China, we are seeing a bit of a pivot there, a bit of a shift. And we're also seeing a lot of noise around immigration. We know that there was a big substantive issue that would get a lot of controversy from the get-go, On the one hand, you have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy saying, I want H-1B visas. But of course, the MAGA base is not so open to that. And now with the crackdowns on immigration coming to a slow, that's also becoming a big issue, a big substantive issue. And I think the other thing also is, interestingly, foreign policy. So when you talk about the war in Ukraine, Trump came into a platform wanting to end forever wars, but now he's arming Ukraine. He's saying that, no, actually the Europeans are paying for it, but that is yet another substantive issue that drives a wedge. Steve Bannon himself on his podcast was quite captured by this issue. So I think what you're seeing maybe is that fragile coalition is starting to fracture.
And the bombing of Iran, of course.
Couldn't agree more.
Massive.
Yeah.
Definite split.
Massive.
Definite split in the media.
Lin Su-Ling is with us. She's the Straits Times opinion editor, sitting in for Steve Oken today on the International News Review. All right, let's come back home to Singapore. The Health Sciences Authority is intensifying its crackdown on vapes, leading to some dramatic arrests in Bishan and Yishun recently. Vapes, for anybody that's not familiar, listening overseas perhaps, are totally illegal in Singapore. You cannot buy them. You cannot sell them. You cannot bring them in the country. You cannot use them here. They are verboten, as they say in Germany. So tell us about this crackdown. It was a big one, wasn't it, Su-Ling?
It was a crackdown, but I think what we are missing is that for the last couple of years, this has been brewing in the background. Now, we know that the UN had actually warned of this a while ago, that we're looking at drug cartels, crime syndicates. It's not a Singapore problem. It's globally a big problem. And the problem is, look how young they are. Let's look at the US, for example. People aged 18 to 24, they were said to be most likely to use e-cigarettes. And we know that vapes were a key use and mechanism through which K-pods come through, right? And the problem is a supply one.
So tell us about the K-pod first, because it's a drug-laced vape, basically, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's etomidate,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
right.
It's hard to pronounce that word, isn't
a
it?
drug. Yeah, it's a drug.
Yeah, it's a drug.
It's
It has
an
laced
actual-
it to get kids addicted to this drug
so it's
substance.
not just the flavored vape
No.
oil that they're using.
It's
but
much more dangerous, much more addictive.
Yeah.
Just much more
and
harmful.
they're called K-pods.
Yeah, K-pods.
Sorry,
I think
carry
it's
on.
important that it's not seen as a smoking problem or a nicotine problem, because vapes are basically a gateway to hard drugs.
Yeah.
You have cannabinoids, you have synthetic substances like, I'm going to try to pronounce this, etomidate, and it's an anesthetic used in non-surgical procedure.
Right.
You also have instances where a lot of these, what they call space oil in Hong Kong, are laced with heroin, fentanyl, ketamine. And I think it's a real big problem because it's not a smoking problem, it's a drug problem.
Yeah.
And it's a law enforcement problem, but it's also very multifaceted because it has to do with the huge outburst of supply around the world. It's also a problem because it's a problem on the demand side when young people are turning to these amidst attitudes of softening against narcotics.
And I have to give your colleagues credit. The Straits Times was involved. I read the piece. One of the Straits Times journalists posed as an interested buyer online, contacted 4 sellers who were offering these vaporizers, these K-pods, and then the Straits Times and the HSA, they contacted sellers who advertised the sale. Great investigative work, I have to say, from the Straits Times. Do you know anything about the journalist's investigation? It's very impressive.
It was a very long investment. So here's the thing about the news media. A lot of the work that we do is behind the scenes hard work, researching, diving into this, talking to people, the hard work that comes before the writing starts to really understand the heart of the issue. And I think we've also heard a lot from parents in recent days. But before that, we were also being told parents were really helpless. They saw their kids get addicted to it. Their kids were showing signs of they were shaking, they were displaying zombie likes, they were slurring their speech. It's really insane.
terrifying.
And I think for us, it was the long, hard work put in before this and before the whole crackdown and before the whole HSA searches in the institutes of higher learning that was important. I think this speaks also to the kind of community news that we're trying to do. Our colleagues in the crime desk working very hard behind the scenes, not just reporting on court cases and police cases, but also what's happening below the surface.
No, I thought it was very good work.
Yeah,
Very good work.
the HSA has said this now for at least a decade. This is the challenge with vapes in Singapore, and the reason that they are not allowing them is that there is no standard on what is in the vape oil, the non-drug laced vape oil, right? And so the carcinogens and the various elements that are in there have not been codified in a way that you can be sure of what you're getting, right? Now, granted, cigarettes are not good for anybody. There's all kinds of bad stuff in cigarettes, arsenic and everything else. But at least there's a standard for what goes into them.
No, but we had former MP Louis Ng on the show, didn't we? We were talking about this, that as you mentioned, Su-Ling, vapes are not a gateway to nicotine. They're not seen as a gateway to smoking. They're a gateway to harder drugs. And these K-pods are literally the conduit, the bridge between the two. It's terrifying. And I don't want to turn this into a political rant, but if you had any doubts about vapes in Singapore, please go to my hometown, go to London and see the mess that vapes have made on that city and other parts of the world as well. It is an epidemic. Yeah. So I'm completely with the HSA and the Straits Times. Great work by the Straits Times this week.
And obviously there'll be more reporting in the future, but especially with so much of it being sold just across in JB, people are easily bringing them in, when they travel across the border or when they come in, through any of the other gateways here. So it's hard to catch people.
Just one point to make also is that it wasn't that long ago, a couple of years, when we thought we were winning the war on smoking. And it was due to a whole host of issues, stigma attached to it. Yep. The laws were tightened to raise the minimum legal age.
The age, yeah.
That was actually quite a measured approach compared to many countries where they were banning. They wanted a end game to tobacco. Singapore said, look, we accept that some people still want to smoke, but all we're saying is that we're going to raise the minimum age so you can make an informed decision when you're older. And there was a bit of a sense that maybe we have arrived at like a low smoking thing in Singapore. But I think what you're seeing now with the advent of vapes is that actually a lot of big tobacco companies, researchers point out, have been very aggressive on social media to push e-cigarettes. And if you recall, actually, in e-cigarettes a couple of years back were framed as a smoking cessation mechanism so that people would learn to help to stop smoking and smoke a more healthy substance. But now we know that was actually not the case. A lot of big tobacco companies went on social media, advertise all these e-cigarettes to people, showing young people e-smoking in cafes. I think now we're seeing the consequences of that come to the fore.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, let's move on. Across the Pacific, CBS has announced the end of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert after 20 years. 10 years.
10 years for him.
10 years, excuse me. A huge shift in late night television. The background of this, CBS was also involved in a government issue, a licensing issue. And so there are questions as to just why Stephen Colbert's show, which has been critical not only of his parent company, CBS, but also of Trump, was being canceled, even though it's a hugely popular show. What do you make of this, Su-Ling?
I think I'm a minority here when I say that I've been watching Stephen Colbert since the Jon Stewart Daily Show where he appeared, and then he had his Colbert Nation. So I would say I'm a fan, but I think while I actually have not much sympathy for Stephen Colbert because he's a huge personality, he'll be able to get an audience wherever he goes.
Whether he
moves to YouTube like Tucker Carlson or whether like Jon Stewart, Apple TV, I think I feel more for the production team.
200 staff members
absolutely
are going to lose their jobs.
But here's the thing. So it occurs to me that Stephen Colbert's late night show was actually doing incredibly well.
Correct.
He was dominating his slot, 2.4 million viewers on average every time he's on air. And actually, if you look at the math, what is disturbing actually that despite that, late night shows have seen a massive drop in advertising. Just 6 years ago in 2018, the 5 broadcast network late shows, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, James Gordon and Seth Meyers, they were pulling in almost 440 million in combined advertising revenue according to Guideline, an advertising data firm. Fast forward to today, that has plunged to half, just 220 million. So it tells me that even when you have the audience, advertising revenue trends perhaps make it not so financially viable.
And it was an expensive show to make, late night TV is, but bringing it back to the political element, Colbert has been very critical of Paramount, which is the parent company of CBS, for settling that lawsuit with Trump for $16 million, just to clarify, over the US president's claim that CBS News deceptively edited an interview with then presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Democrats have been out in force. Jimmy Kimmel, other late night hosts, they're saying this is not economic, this is purely political. What do you think?
So I think the facts are that Colbert did criticize Paramount, and he was quite scathing in his comments. He called it a big fat bribe, right? Yeah. But it's also important to know what CBS had said, where they reaffirmed that this was purely a financial decision against a challenging backdrop in late night and not at all related to the performance, content, or other matters happening in Paramount. That's one thing. But you can understand why Colbert is such a big personality that galvanizes a lot of people around it, especially his Democrat base. The reality is that the media landscape in the US is incredibly polarized, and even though Colbert has a base of very energized people, they're mostly Democrats, and I can see why this is politicized.
Yep. Okay.
I'll just say briefly, Trump has been very balanced. He said, I absolutely love that Colbert has got fired. His talent was even less than his ratings. Glenn, over to you.
Okay, let's finish off briefly with Corporation Drive in Jurong West was the site of an egg spill. A truck dropped a whole bunch of eggs at the side of the road, and so, of course, a stomper photographed it, put it up on the new paper, and what was happening next was totally predictable. People running to the side of the road, picking up the unbroken eggs and taking them home. I love these Singapore stories.
You know what they say, don't cry over spilled eggs.
It was actually one of the best headlines I've seen in a while. Passers-by scramble over Jurong West egg spill. Yeah. That was actually pretty clever.
Good headline. Good headline. What did you make of it, Su Ling?
When life gives you eggs, you make scrambled eggs.
I didn't have a problem with it. Some people were complaining, they're stealing the eggs. Whose eggs? They're on the floor. They're unbroken.
They're not going to resell them after they've been on the street, for goodness sakes.
They were cheeky. But which came first, the cheeky or the egg?
Oh, every now and then you get a fun story in this town.
Great
right?
story, that one.
But there were actually, if you see the pictures, there were a lot of eggs that were unbroken.
Yeah.
Like
eggs are resilient. I've seen those science shows where if you push them at the edges, they don't break and all the rest.
You put them in your hand, you try to squeeze it, right? You can't break it.
Yeah, some of those eggs. Oh dear! But it was a typical nice, fun Singapore story, Su Ling.
Of course, love the puns. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, there we go.
If you were near there, would you have picked up some eggs?
I think that I would be at work.
That's a very diplomatic
maybe
answer.
Tell my mom and text my mom to tell her to go pick up some free eggs.
I would absolutely pick them up.
Yeah, the shots were definitely aunties and uncles, hunched over picking them up. So. Yeah, good for them.
How many can you get? Because you can only carry 3 or 4.
Right? I think you would probably take your shirt and make a little self basket there or something.
That's good. Yeah.
Anyway, Su Ling, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you come back again another time and join us when you can.
I'd love to be back.
Yep. Joining us today on the radio, Lin Su Ling, the Straits Times opinion editor on our International News Review. Have a great week.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.